Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Some massive news for this Nebraska program coming out late Tuesday morning. Dana Holgorsen going to join this Nebraska program as an offensive consultant for the rest of 2024. I can't stress how much I love this move for Nebraska. The Nebraska fans who've been rocking with the boys going back to the summer months, y'all know I was a massive fan of Nebraska potentially adding him during this offseason. I think it's a little late, but I'm finally happy that it happened. You look at Dana Holgorsen and say the proof is in the pudding with Dana Holgorsen when it comes to developing offenses, developing quarterbacks. I mean, you look at the track record going back to his time at Texas Tech. Now, I think one of the misconceptions about Dana Holgorsen is he's only a quarterback's coach. No, he's worked with wide receivers like Michael Crabtree going back to Texas Tech. Not only does Nebraska have some really talented quarterbacks in this locker room, right? Dylan Raiola, Danny Kalen, but even more importantly, there's a lot of talent coming into this Nebraska program at the wide receiver position as well. I think Dana Holgorsen has so much more to offer than just quarterback development for this Nebraska program. You look at the track record again, going back to Texas Tech, Graham Harrell, Michael Crabtree, working under Coach Mike Leach. You go to his time with Houston, working under Case Keenum or developing Case Keenum. You go to his time at Oklahoma State, Brandon Weeden. I mean, those are some of the more prolific and productive quarterbacks that we've seen over the last 20 years. Dana Holgorsen has had his hand with all of those quarterbacks. Really big hire. And what I'll say here is I'm kind of interested to see what the trajectory looks like with Dana Holgorsen within this Nebraska program where you bring him in as a consultant. I would love to see him back in 2025. Look, I think Matt Rhule absolutely crushed the defensive coaching staff when he got to Nebraska. Obviously headlined by Tony White, but you look at that defensive coaching staff and say they're doing a phenomenal job for Nebraska. Now you look at the offensive side of the football, and we're going to talk about this a little bit more. I think it leaves a little bit to be desired. You go back to last year, we had we had question marks about Coach Satterfield coming to Nebraska in the first place, right? He was kind of a failed offensive coordinator at South Carolina, didn't do a great job with Matt Rhule at Carolina. We kind of blindly followed Matt Rhule. I think it's fair to say now that we're 1.5 years in, I don't know if Coach Satterfield's the answer. Like the offense hasn't gotten much better year two under Coach Satterfield. I think you're going to see some changes to this offensive coaching staff for Nebraska. And you're kind of hoping, at least in my opinion, that Dana Holgorsen comes in as an offensive consultant for the last couple of weeks and then maybe gets elevated to have a little bit more of a role for this Nebraska program on the offensive side of the football. I'm really excited to get into this one. Dana Holgorsen, again, massive fan of this dude as a football coach. Think he's really one of the best in the business in terms of coaching and designing offenses. Fired up to get into this one. Now, for the Nebraska fans, you all know I love talking this program. I can't thank you guys enough for all the support, highs and lows of 2024. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If you all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Much more importantly, would love to hear from you guys in the comment section in a couple of different manners. One, how we're feeling about Dana Holgorsen, which I imagine a lot of Nebraska fans are fired up about. But I think more importantly, would like to hear how you guys feel about Coach Satterfield as well. I think there's a lot of Nebraska fans from what I've seen that have some question marks about the offense and the offensive coaching staff. Would like to hear from you guys as well down there. Appreciate y'all rocking with it. Let's get into it. Now, let's briefly kind of dive into Dana Holgorsen and then talk about what we've seen from this Nebraska offense so far in 2024. Dana Holgorsen's track record, even as a head coach, is pretty dang good. Like, there's a lot of head coaches that are kind of 3 years and out, a lot of failed head coaches. I wouldn't say Dana Holgorsen is an elite head coach. I don't think he's the leader that Matt Rhule is. That being said, I think he's still a pretty quality head coach, but I think more importantly, he is a very good offensive mind. Good offenses follow Dana Holgorsen wherever they go. And you go back to where he kind of got his roots, going back to Texas Tech, working under Mike Leach. Again, Graham Harrell, Michael Crabtree at wide receiver. You go to Oklahoma State, Brandon Weeden. You go to Houston, Case Keenum. I mean, the quarter, it's not a coincidence when you see him go from stop to stop to stop and see good quarterbacks putting up massive numbers. And so I think the quarterback development is first what you're most excited about. You can tell Matt Rhule's putting a lot of thought into this. Adding a guy like Glenn Thomas, who I'm a really big fan of as well. Look, you got an opportunity with not one but two really talented quarterbacks, and Dylan Raiola and Danny Kalen. You did a really nice job kind of putting some wide receivers around them, guys like Jamal Banks and Isaiah Nayor. I think the next step now is to put a coaching staff around them that are, proven coaches in terms of developing quarterbacks. I wouldn't say Coach Satterfield is one of those guys. Glenn Thomas, but more importantly, Dana Holgorsen, they certainly are. And so the coaching staff on the offensive side of the football, it's been leaving a little bit to be desired. Not only Coach Satterfield, but quite frankly, a couple other position groups. Adding Dana Holgorsen, I think, is massive, and I would love to see him get a little bit of a bigger role maybe going into 2025. Now, secondly, I do want to talk about what we've seen from this Nebraska offense as well. It's just not been very good, and I think my first frustration is Nebraska's not running the football well. It's not very creative in terms of how they run the football. We kind of knew you needed to run the football with a true freshman quarterback, and they're just not doing it. I mean, they're outside the top 100 in yards per carry. Now, I think it's a lot, and we've talked about this. I don't think it's that much on the offensive line. I look at it and say I think the running backs are leaving some plays out on the field, but I think more importantly, you look at the passing attack. I feel like we're leaving the training wheels on Dylan a little bit too much. I mean, we're not using play action, which I would love to see Nebraska get to more of. He's only 21% of Dylan's dropbacks are coming off play action. 20% of Dylan Raiola's dropbacks are screens, which again, you bring Dylan in, what's his best attribute? It's pushing the ball down the field. There's not many quarterbacks that throw a better deep ball than what Dylan does. And so I would like to see whether it's Coach Satterfield or whether it's just another offensive coordinator in 2025, which I think that's where we're trending. I like to see an offensive coordinator, one, show a little bit more development, but I think more importantly, let Dylan be the five-star quarterback that we all know he is and that we've all seen with our two Ys at times in 2024. Like you go back to that Ohio State game, just felt like they didn't ask Dylan to go out and win that football game. I felt like they had the training wheels on. I felt like they were treating him like he wasn't a very good quarterback. We know he can make the throws. Go out and let him make those throws. You don't have to put the training wheels on this kid. So that's kind of where I'm at with the offensive coordinator. I think the offensive coaching staff in general leaves a lot to be desired. I think this is as good as it gets. I mean, and Dan, there's a lot of worlds where Dana Holgorsen is still a head coach. He's a little bit abrasive as a head coach, and that's no secret. But he's a damn good football coach that was a good head coach. Even more importantly, was really, really good working with offenses and quarterbacks. This is about as home run as it gets. I'm not sure why it took this long. I'm happy it finally happened. Would love to see Dana with Nebraska as long as they can keep him there because this is a good one. And you look at Dana, you look at Glenn Thomas, the coaching staff's going in the right direction, which is, kind of where I think Nebraska needs to go in this offseason, focus on this coaching staff and, continue to surround Dylan with some coaches that can get the best out of him. Because if you get that, this Nebraska team's going to be dangerous. We'll close it out there. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys. We'll talk to y'all later.